Hello learners, I am Deepu Basumatari, Assistant Professor of Philosophy at Krishnakanda Handek State Open University, Assam. Today we will be discussing Unit 3 titled Rationalism as a Theory of Knowledge from the paper on Fundamentals of Philosophy. This unit will be covered in one video. In today's video, we will explore a detailed discussion of the concept of rationalism as a theory of knowledge, its characteristics, and the criticism attached to it. So let's begin the video with a general understanding of rationalism. Rationalism is an epistemological theory that emphasizes reason as a primary source of knowledge and asserts that certain truths can be known a priori, independent of sensory experience. Rationalists believe that certain knowledge is innate or can be derived through reason alone, without the need for sensory experience. This a priori knowledge is seen as necessary and universally true. Examples include logical and mathematical truths, which rationalists argue are self evident and do not depend on empirical verification. Rationalists argue that human mind possesses inherent ideas or concepts that are not derived from experience but are instead part of our rational nature. These innate ideas form the foundation of further knowledge and understanding. For instance, the concept of space, time, causality, even more principles are often cited as innate ideas. Rationalism emphasizes the importance of deductive reasoning, where conclusions are logically derived from self evident premises. Deductive reasoning ensures the certainty and necessity of knowledge. For example, mathematical proofs are based on deductive logic, starting from axioms and deriving theorems through a series of logical steps. Rationalists propose that mind has the ability to grasp certain truths directly through intellectual intuition, without the meditation of sensory experience. This immediate understanding is considered a higher form of knowledge. Intellectual intuitions allows individuals to apprehend fundamental truths about reality, such as the existence of God or the nature of the self. So, learners, after going through the introduction part of the rationalism theory, we'll now explicate on the main proponents of rationalism. The first one is Rene Descartes. Descartes' famous assertion, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, served as the foundation of his rationalist philosophy. He argued that the act of thinking is undeniable and self evident, providing a secure starting point for knowledge. Descartes employed systematic doubt to strip away all uncertain beliefs, arriving at indubitable truths. Through this method, he aimed to establish a foundation for knowledge based on clear and distinct ideas. Descartes posited that certain ideas, such as the concept of God, infinity, and perfection, are innate and not derived from sensory experience. These ideas are imprinted in the human mind by the God. The second proponent is Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza argued that there is only one substance which he identifies as God or nature. All individual entities are merely modes or manifestation of the single substance. Spinoza applied a geometric method of reasoning similar to mathematical proofs to derive his metaphysical system. He believed that through deductive reasoning we could arrive at necessary truths about the nature of reality. Spinoza held that the highest form of knowledge is the intellectual love of God, which involves an intuitive understanding of the unity and necessity of all things in nature. The third proponent is Leibniz. Leibniz proposed that the universe is composed of simple, indivisible substances called monads. Each monad contains within it the principles of its own development and reflects the entire universe in a pre-established harmony. Leibniz argued that mind is not a blank slate, but is pre-equipped with innate ideas and principles. He believed that these innate concepts provide the basis for all knowledge. Leibniz's principles of sufficient reason states that nothing happens without a reason. These principles underlies his belief in a rational and intelligible universe where every event has an explanation. Next, learners will discuss on the implication for the theory of knowledge, which is rationalism. After explicating on the proponents of rationalism, the first point is certainty and necessity. Rationalism seeks to establish knowledge that is certain and necessary. By relying on reason and innate ideas, rationalists aim to avoid the uncertainties and fallibilities associated with sensory experience. Mathematical and logical truths, for example, are seen as paradigms of certain and necessary knowledge. The second one is limits of empirical knowledge. Rationalists critique the limitation of empirical knowledge, arguing that sensory experience can be deceptive and cannot provide the certainty required for true knowledge. They emphasize the role of reason in transcending this limitation. For instance, the senses might deceive us into thinking that a straight stick in water is bent, but reason corrects this illusion. Next point is mathematics and logic. Rationalism has had a significant influence on the development of mathematics and logic. The belief in a priori knowledge and deductive reasoning aligns with the structure of mathematical proofs and logical systems, which are seen as models of certain and necessary knowledge. Rationalist principles underlie much of modern mathematical theory and practice. The next point is metaphysical insight. Rationalism provides a framework for exploring metaphysical questions about the nature of reality, existence of God, and the fundamental principles of the universe. By relying on reason, rationalists seek to uncover deep truths that go beyond empirical observations. For example, Descartes' arguments for the existence of God and the immortality of the soul are based on rationalist philosophy. The next point is influence on modern philosophy. Rationalism has shaped the course of modern philosophy, influencing subsequent thinkers such as Immanuel Kant, who sought to synthesize rationalist and empiricist traditions. Kant's critical philosophy, which posits that mind structures sensory experience through innate categories, is a direct response to the rationalist emphasis on innate ideas and a priori knowledge. Rationalism as a theory of knowledge emphasizes the primacy of reason, innate ideas, and deductive reasoning in the acquisition of knowledge. It seeks to establish knowledge that is certain and necessary, critiquing the limitation of sensory experience. The contribution of key rationalist philosophers such as Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz have had a profound impact on the development of epistemology, metaphysics, and modern philosophy. Rationalism's focus on the active role of the mind in structuring knowledge continues to influence contemporary philosophical inquiry, highlighting the enduring significance of reason in our understanding of the world. So, learners, after analyzing the implications for theory of knowledge, we will now move on to the characteristics of rationalism, which is very much essential part of the rationalism as a theory of knowledge. So the first characteristic is that a priori knowledge. A priori knowledge refers to knowledge that is independent of experience. This type of knowledge is considered universal and necessary, and rationalists argue that it forms the foundation of all true knowledge. Examples of a priori knowledge include mathematical statements like 2 plus 2 equal to 4, or the angles of a triangle add up to 183 degrees are known a priori because they can be understood and verified through reason alone. Logical principles such as the principle of non-contradiction, which states that contradictory statement cannot both be true, is a logical truth known a priori. Metaphysical concepts such as causality or substance can be considered a priori as they are fundamental to our understanding of reality and not derived from sensory experience. The next characteristic is that innate ideas. Rationalists propose that human mind is born with ideas and principles that are intrinsic to its nature. These innate ideas provide the groundwork for all further knowledge and include ideas like space, time, causality, and number, which are essential for structuring our experiences. Some rationalists like Kant argue that certain ethical principles are innate and universally accessible through reason. Descartes argued for the innate idea of God, suggesting that the concept of perfect being is imprinted in the human mind. Number three characteristic is that deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is the process of reasoning from one or more general premises to reach a logically certain conclusion. Rationalists place a high value on deductive reasoning as it ensures the certainty and the necessity of the conclusion derived. For example, by using axioms and definitions, mathematicians derive theorems through deductive steps. Descartes' method of doubt and his subsequent establishment of the certainty of the self, which is cogito ergo sum, exemplifies deductive reasoning in philosophy. The next characteristic is that intellectual intuition. Intellectual intuition refers to the mind's ability to grasp certain truths directly, without the need for sensory input. This immediate and self evident understanding is crucial for rationalist thought. Descartes' realization of his own existence is an example of intellectual intuition. He perceived the truth of his existence directly through thinking. Mathematicians often have direct insight into the truths of certain axioms and theorems without needing empirical verification. The next characteristic is that emphasis on reason. Reason is a primary tool for gaining knowledge in rationalism. Rationalists argue that reason is superior to sensory experience because it provides access to necessary and universal truths. This contrasts with empiricism, which emphasizes knowledge derived from sensory experience. The next characteristic is that skepticism about sensory experience. Rationalists often express skepticism about the reliability of sensory experience. They argue that senses can deceive and, therefore, sensory data must be scrutinized and interpreted through reason. Sensory experiences can be misleading, for example, optical illusion, and thus cannot be fully trusted as a source of certain knowledge. Descartes used the example of dreaming to illustrate that sensory experience can be indistinguishable from reality, highlighting the need for a foundation in reason. The next characteristic is that metaphysical and ethical principles. Rationalism extends to the exploration of metaphysical and ethical principles through reason. Rationalism seeks to uncover fundamental truths about reality, existence, and morality. Rationalist arguments for the existence of God, such as Descartes' ontological argument, rely on reason rather than empirical evidence. Rationalist ethics, particularly Kantian ethics, derive universal moral principles through rational analysis, emphasizing duty and the categorical imperative. Now, learners, we will discuss upon the criticism of rationalism theory after evaluating the main characteristics of rationalism theory. As we know, rationalism, despite its profound impact on philosophy and science, has faced significant criticism over the centuries. Critics argue against its reliance on reason as the sole or primary source of knowledge, pointing out various limitations and challenges. Here are some of the key criticism in greater detail. Number one is overemphasis on a priori knowledge. Critics argue that rationalism overemphasizes a priori knowledge at the expense of empirical evidence. They contend that many important truths about the world can only be discovered through sensory experience and observation. Empiricists like John Locke and David Hume argue that all knowledge originates from sensory experience. Locke, for example, proposed that the idea of the mind as a tabula rasa, blank slate at birth, where all ideas are acquired through experience. Hume further argued that even the concept of causality is derived from habitual association of events rather than from an innate rational understanding. Critics claim that reason alone cannot account for all forms of knowledge, particularly in the natural sciences, where empirical observation and experimentations are crucial. For example, the laws of physics are derived from careful observation and experimentations rather than purely rational deduction. The number two criticism is innate ideas controversy. The concept of innate ideas has been a major point of contention. Critics question the existence of ideas that are supposedly present in the mind from birth. Empiricists argue that there is no empirical evidence to support the existence of innate ideas. They contend that all ideas can be traced back to sensory experiences. For instance, Locke argued that if ideas were truly innate, then everyone would have them. Yet there is significant variation in people's beliefs and knowledge. Modern psychology and cognitive science suggest that much of what was considered innate is actually a result of early cognitive development and cultural influences. Research in developmental psychology shows that children learn concepts through interaction with their environment rather than being born with fully formed ideas. Next criticism is that skepticism about deductive reasoning. While rationalists rely heavily on deductive reasoning, critics point out that deductive reasoning has its limitation. Deductive reasoning is only as reliable as the premises it starts with. If the initial premises are flawed or unverified, the conclusion drawn from them will also be questionable. For example, if one starts with the incorrect premise that all swans are white, the deductive conclusion that a black bird cannot be a swan will be false. Deductive reasoning is often seen as limited in scope, particularly in dealing with complex, real world phenomena that require empirical investigation and inductive reasoning. While deductive reasoning is useful in mathematics and logic, it may not adequately address the dynamic and variable nature of empirical reality. The next criticism is that challenges from empirical sciences. The advancement of empirical sciences has posed significant challenges to rationalist approaches. The scientific method relies heavily on observation, experimentation, and empirical data. This approach has proven highly effective in advancing knowledge, often contradicting rationalist claims that reason alone can provide certain knowledge. Scientific discoveries, such as those in physics, chemistry, and biology, are grounded in empirical research. For example, Euclidean geometry was long considered universally true, but the development of non Euclidean geometrics and their application in modern physics, for example, general relativity, challenge this notion. This shows that what was thought to be an a priori truth can be revised in the light of new empirical evidence. The next criticism is the problem of subjectivity. Rationalism's reliance on reason and innate ideas can lead to form of subjectivity. Different individuals may arrive at different conclusions using their reason, leading to subjective and sometimes conflicting truths. For example, philosophical debates often involve rational arguments on both sides, yet they can lead to divergent conclusions. What is considered reasonable or self evident can vary greatly across different cultural, historical contexts, challenging the universality of rationalist claims. For instance, concept of justice, morality may differ significantly between cultures, suggesting that reason alone may not be sufficient to establish universal truths. The next criticism is lack of practical application. Critics argue that rationalism often lacks practical applicability, particularly in the sciences and everyday life. Empirical methods provide practical knowledge and technological advancements that directly impact daily life and the natural world, whereas rationalist approaches may remain more abstract and theoretical. Technological innovations, medical advancement, and engineering feats are typically grounded in empirical research and experimentations. Empirical approaches are seen as more adaptable to new information and changing circumstances, as they rely on continuous observation and testing rather than fixed rationalist principles. The scientific method allows for the modification of theories in light of new data, whereas rationalism may be more rigid in adherence to pre established ideas. The next criticism is historical and philosophical challenges. David Hume distinguished between relation of ideas and matters of fact, arguing that rationalist knowledge falls into the former category, which, while certain, does not inform us about the actual world. Hume asserted that while the relation of ideas, such as mathematical truths, are necessarily true, they do not provide knowledge about empirical reality, which is known through matters of fact and experience. Immanuel Kant synthesized rationalism and empiricism, arguing that while knowledge begins with experience, it doesn't arise solely from experience. Instead, the mind actively structures sensory input using innate categories, blending rationalist and empiricist insights. Kant's critical philosophy challenged the pure rationalist position by showing that both reason and experience are necessary for knowledge. Next, learners will embark upon the nature of innate ideas and its refutation from the empiricists, which occupies a very significant place in the rationalism theory. The theory of innate ideas is a fundamental aspect of rationalism, emphasizing that certain concepts or principles are inherently present in the human mind from birth. According to rationalist philosophers such as Rene Descartes, these ideas are not derived from experience but are intrinsic to human reason, serve as the foundation for acquiring knowledge. Innate ideas are considered universal, immutable, self evident truths, such as the concept of mathematics, logic, and morality. For instance, Descartes argued that ideas like the existence of God, the concept of perfection, and the principle of geometry are innately embedded in the human mind. The rationalist claim of innate ideas was revolutionary in its time, as it challenged the empiricist notion that all knowledge arises from sensory experience. Rationalists believe that mind plays an active role in organizing and interpreting reality, relying on these pre existing ideas to develop a structured understanding of the world. Now, look at the key arguments for the innate ideas. First is universality, where rationalists argue that some ideas, such as the principle of causality or mathematical truths, for example, 2 plus 2 equal to 4, are universally accepted, not contingent upon cultural or individual differences, suggesting their innate origin. Necessity. Certain truths like logical principles, for example, the law of non contradictions, are necessary, cannot be derived from variable sensory experiences. Next, precondition for knowledge. Rationalists maintain that innate ideas act as a framework for interpreting sensory input, allowing humans to recognize patterns, develop abstract concepts, and understand complex relationships. Now, learners, we have to look at the How empiricist philosophers review the innate ideas. The concept of innate ideas proposed by rationalists has faced significant criticism, especially from empiricist philosophers like John Locke and David Hume. Empiricists argue that knowledge originates entirely from experience and that the mind starts as a tabula rasa, blank slate, shaped by sensory input, reflection. John Locke refuted the idea of innate ideas in an essay concerning human understanding. He argued that if certain ideas were innate, they would be universally recognized by all humans, including children and those without formal educations. Locke pointed out that concepts like God and morality are not universally accepted, implying they are not inherent but acquired through experience. He emphasized that all knowledge comes from sensory experience, sensations, or internal reflection. David Hume further rejected innate ideas, asserting that all knowledge is based on impression, which is vivid sensory experiences, and ideas fan copies of these impressions. He argued that complex concepts like causality are derived from experience, not pre existing knowledge. Critics also argue there is no empirical evidence to support innate ideas. Cognitive science and modern psychology shows that knowledge is constructed gradually through interaction with the environment. The diversity of cultural beliefs further undermines the claim that certain ideas are universally inherent in the human mind. The ongoing debate between rationalism and empiricism continues to shape our understanding of knowledge. So, learners, in the conclusion, it can be said that rationalism has significantly influenced philosophy by asserting that knowledge arises from innate ideas and a priori principles, emphasizing the certainty and universality of truths independent of sensory experience. Thinkers like Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz highlighted the mind's ability to uncover universal principles through reason, particularly in fields like mathematics, metaphysics. However, rationalism has faced criticism, particularly for its over reliance on abstract reasoning and neglect of empirical evidence. Critics like John Locke argue that mind is tabula rasa, which is a blank slate shaped entirely by sensory experience. Rationalism's focus on deductive reasoning is seen as limited, especially when addressing complex phenomena in the natural and social worlds, which require empirical observations and inductive reasoning. The growth of the empirical sciences, relying on experimentations and evidence, has exposed the shortcomings of rationalism. Its abstract nature has also been criticized for lacking practical application in understanding human experience, cultural diversity, and subjective perspectives. Philosophers like Hume and Kant responded by integrating reason with sensory experience. Hume emphasized sensory perception, while Kant synthesized rationalism and empiricism, acknowledging both reason and experience in knowledge acquisition. Despite its criticism, rationalism legacy persists in fields like logic, artificial intelligence, theoretical physics, continuing to shape debates on the nature of knowledge. So, dear learners, today we have explored the theory of rationalism as a perspective on knowledge and its criticism, including its historical context and key principles. We delve into how rationalism emphasizes the primacy of reason, the role of innate ideas, and the use of deductive reasoning to attain certain knowledge. We discuss the contribution of key rationalist philosophers such as Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz in shaping this view, as well as the challenges they face from empirical sciences and critique of the overemphasis on a priori knowledge. This criticism questioned the notion of innate ideas and the limitation of deductive reasoning in grasping reality. So, Thank you for staying with me till the end of this video. See you in the next one.